Nice, man. Thanks so much. And with that, let's open the Deep Funding Town Hall. It's so great to see everyone here. You may have noticed I've been not around for a while, but I'm back. So it's so great to see some old faces and new faces. Yes, and Peter just tuned in. Yes, cool. I'm gonna open up with sharing my screen. To give you a little introduction of what this event is all about. So, Deep Funding Town Hall is an initiative by the SingularityNET community, and it's in collaboration with the Foundation. We aim to establish an open online space for Deep Funding and SingularityNET community to connect and collaborate, enable each other to be better. You can stay in touch with SingularityNET. Here's the link. Deep Funding and the AI Marketplace will post this in the chat. And in the main room today, we have William Thistleton and Robert Haas. I hope I'm saying that right. They'll be in the main room today, and it will be about contribution scores, proof of concept progress. Before we head over to that, I would love to give the floor to Jan to give any news and updates that he would like to.
Yeah, thank you. It's exciting times, as Chris said, but he doesn't know half of what we're talking about at SingularityNET and what's going on. As you know, we're planning on Deep Funding Round 3, and we were actually preparing to give you the final last changes and then go with it. The bad news might be that we might need another week for that. The good news is that we have a very good reason for doing that. And this is so new that this is actually something that came up 1 hour ago in a talk with Ben and some other people. It's related to some discussions that we're having, some serious discussions that we're having on our decentralized AI platform and the direction we want it to take. That is becoming more and more crystallized, that vision over what it would be over 3-6 months, but also afterwards. But we're also looking at a midterm here. And I don't want to spill all the beans here right now. We'll do that soon enough. The discussions also with the technical team, etc., are very lively and going on and very condensed. So it will be a while until that's fully crystallized. But we do think that there's an opportunity for deep funding to have a pool that will tie into the things that we are aiming for with our new platform. But we need a little bit more time to give you, everybody, a little bit more context about that, so that proposals that will land in that pool will be properly aligned with the things that we're thinking about. It's a little bit mysterious the way I'm talking about, and that's on purpose. I hope I get you excited a little bit. So I hope, ideally next week, knowing how things work. It might also be the week afterwards, but I hope it won't be longer. I hope in that time frame we will be able to give a little bit more context about this, and then also explain how this will tie into Deep Funding Round 3. So that's all I think we need to say right now about Deep Funding Round 3. We'll make a proper article with all small and large changes that we will have. I don't think there are that many changes, but there are always a few tweaks that we can make. And of course, this thing that I've just been talking about. So that will be published sooner. One other thing I would like to mention is, I think I talked last time also about wanting to create a focus group. So we're having governance meetings with, and they are very interesting. I really do get new insights, and so they're valuable. But we like to do this more focused. So therefore, a focus group, which would mean that we want to select 5 people with whom we can have a little bit more deeper discussion, and maybe also a little bit more frequent, and not just in the 1.5 hours bi-weekly, but also in between on social media. So they will really be a sparring partner for us. And we also hope that this focus group in turn will be a mediator between the internal people of Deep Funding and the wider community of Deep Funding, explaining and informing our ideas, but also collecting feedback from the community. That doesn't mean that we won't be in the community in those calls anymore, but we will have a more channeled discussion that way. So we are experimenting in SingularityNET all the time. We have these governance calls bi-weekly. We started with governance rounds, and this is yet another, at this point, it is an experiment, but I really hope it will flourish. And while it's now selected and advisory in nature, I hope that when we are matured sufficiently, both in toolings and in community and other things, it will become more and more important. And maybe we'll at some point get to the trajectory where it will be more elected, or part selected and part elected. I don't know what makes most sense. And then at some point, maybe it will become a representative body that can actually help in decision making. But that is a process we have to go. I have no idea how quick that process will go, if we can go through these steps in less than a year, or if it will take 3 years, or maybe be surprised and half a year from now we're already there. But we'll take it in a considerate way, in a responsible way. That's the word I was looking for. Not to. I'm always impatient with these things, but we try to do it. I'm sometimes being pushed back by all of you in the things that I want to accomplish and the timelines. So we'll do it responsible one step at a time. So this is a first step, potentially, of a new journey. So why I'm making such a long story about this? Today, I put a blog post online on deepfunding.ai. If you go to updates, you will see the blogs at the top of the page. And there's one article that describes what I just told you, and probably a little bit more. And it also has a link at the bottom to a forum, a Google form. And everybody who would be interested in joining this focus group can apply by using that forum. Would be nice if you can give a little bit of explanation who you are and why you think you are suitable for that. We also will have a look at diversity, see if we can have at least, well, I didn't ask for gender, to be honest, but I did ask for where you are located in the world, because it would be nice to have some different cultures, for instance, as a sounding board. It will be compensated, not much, but we'll start slow, and then when the value of this body will go up, and maybe the responsibilities will also go up, we can improve that as well, as much as it makes sense. So it's already a step up from the also reward-wise, a step up from the current governance meeting. We're all friends and volunteers there, which I massively appreciate. I also want people, I would love to have people that are intrinsically motivated in the first place, and not just doing it for some bucks. That would not be the right thing, especially not at this stage, I would say. So yeah, looking forward to all your applications. And I'm sure, like the things I was just mysteriously mentioning, there will be a lot of interesting things that we can talk about, and you can help us with, think through. I have one more item and then I'll shut up. That is our new platform. I also talked that we are, at least for deep funding and the submission flow, we are moving away from our Sway, our dear friends from Sway, which we will continue to collaborate with, but just not in deep funding. But because we found out that deep funding has some very special needs. So we are making this, we are building this into our website that we are already building out on other parts. So that is, we're already halfway there, I would say. I'm really excited about that. I think it will be great. We can also connect it later to contribution scores, etc., to make it even more versatile and balanced. But we are now at the stage that we can start doing a first testing round. It will be kind of a usability test rather than just a feature test. We have created an Excel for that. And yeah, I think next week we can start, but we have a process around that as well. Maybe it's best, Raphael, if you will explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jan. Indeed, very good news, especially for us. It's important to have these new processes involved. Sometimes we have some schedule, but with good news, we have to postpone. That's interesting. About the situation itself, the process that we are passing through, it connects to something good, which is this decentralization of deep funding as well. We already have a very good decentralization process and framework around ideation, right? With the governance part and where everybody can give your inputs. However, we also believe that the reverse, it's important. So how can we bring more people from bottom up with the tasks and etc. that are delivered in the operational part of deep funding? That's something that we also want to decentralize because we want to have more engagement from people, the community. We want to be more scalable as well as things keeps growing and bring this democratization of process renewing with different backgrounds. It's not just Raphael and Jan telling what the best way to do, but having people engaged can bring new ideas and refresh the whole process. Ultimately, it's not ideal to go directly into the situation of, well, when we have a centralized process, now we are completely decentralized. This can bring a lot of problems, especially with results and outcomes. Therefore, what we are aiming for, it's a staged, phased process where we are going to have some sort of intermediaries that can also support this, creating the framework, not only creating the framework, but also helping to managing the entire process, to then have the process itself. And like Jan mentioned now, what we are having is one or two first tasks that we want to experiment with this new process, and one of those being exactly the testing of the new platform. In the right time, which is going to be soon, we are going to release more information about that and how all you can participate and contribute with this. Right, okay, about this part is clear. I would like to make another quick remark, actually asking you again, you guys that are from awarded teams, round 1, round 2, we really believe in this decentralization process, right? So our peer reviews that I shared with you, the documentation, the presentation, and also a form for submission for those that want to participate in the peer review process. Please, let's make this happen in the best way and decentralized way with your participation as well, okay? We are counting on you for that. Thank you, and I guess Fly, Jan?
Yeah, Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks so much. Great to get the old update. Shall we throw it over to William, to introduce his topic in the main room today? Let's give it over.
Sure thing. To be honest, my job today was to introduce Robert, who actually worked on a very nice formal presentation. And I'm not seeing him here, right? Unless he's hiding somewhere. I don't see his little tile. But I'll at least give you an overview. But he's the one who's been doing the work in proof of concept. So he's really much the better person to discuss it. But as long as we're here, I'll just make a couple of remarks. And I will say something that was kind of fun today. I think some of you guys know I'm a professor, I'm a math professor. And we had a nice meeting of young researchers, undergraduate researchers today. And I was able to talk a little bit about SingularityNET with those guys. And they were just like transfixed. It's, if you're not in the world, and you guys might, maybe you appreciate this, and maybe you're in it so long. If you're not in this world and you're looking in from the outside, or you're hearing about it for the first time, it's like almost magical. So it was very nice to be able to share at least a little bit with the undergrads. Now I see that the host has disabled participant screen sharing, and I wouldn't mind sharing something with you.
It's enabled. You should be ready to go.
Okay, let's give it another shot. So that means I have to find the right one, and I think it's this one.
The API can't help you.
And I assume you're seeing the word achievements up on top?
Yes.
All right, good. You never know. So as I say, I'm just sort of filling in for Robert here. He's, it's extraordinary working with him, working with Joanna, working with Kendrick, really, really good teammates. The project is moving forward on time, which is something that's maybe a little bit rare on many projects in the real world. And so we have our second milestone complete, and we anticipate having the third one done by the end of July and the fourth done by the end of August. What Robert has been doing is meeting a lot with Jan. I think both Joanna and Robert have been meeting with Jan, if not regularly, then at least extensively. And so I think there's a good understanding of what the customer is looking for. As far as achievements, I'll read through some of this, and you can read it better than I can. I believe that you have access to, though I guess Raphael in particular, you'll tell me if I'm wrong about this. I believe everybody has access to our milestone reports. Is that true?
Yes. The milestone reports are updated in the details page on our website. So just go to your page.
Very good. Because in addition to some of these bullets that I'm about to read you, Robert prepared a very extensive appendix that does a deep dive into a lot of these topics. First thing is, he's modeled the data and working in database software. I think he likes DuckDB an awful lot, and I think it's been successful in this context. So he's got a nice model for the data. He's gone through the extract, transform, and load process, and some of this, I think many of you are much more conversant in the database world than I am. I just know a little bit, and I just teach a little bit. So these words will, I imagine, be meaningful. So he's got it happening. It's working nicely. He worked through the calculation that was done manually by the Deep Funding team, and he was able to reproduce all those results, which is a nice error check on both sides. So his sort of database approach is confirming the existing spreadsheet approach. And he's doing a little bit theoretical and then moving on with some other approaches as well. I think he's in a better position to talk about this particular bullet. those who are interested can hit the appendix and, as I say, really get an awful lot of data that way. And since Rob isn't here, I guess that's basically what I'm going to tell you. So I apologize. He has, oh my goodness, there we go.
I'm terribly sorry. I confused the hour. I thought it would start in half an hour.
Oh, you're just in time. So I was mangling your work, but you know, the incredible Robert Haas is now with us. Let me turn it over to you. You can do a much better job describing your work than I was doing.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, I'm sorry that I mixed up the hours. I would have prepared a video. It takes about 15 minutes where I show the full process. So if you would have 15 minutes, I could guide you through the software implementation, if that's fine for you. I would need to share my screen, share sound, and fetch the right window. Just one moment, please. So I hope I get that going on Zoom as well, but usually it should work. Okay, I cannot see it yet. I try it again. Sharing screen, sharing sound, and the video. Okay, I will start it. If you do not have a sound, please just let me know. Otherwise, I'll let it run. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, then let's go. Hello, my name is Robert, and I'm talking about a project called Community Contribution Scores, which was awarded in SingularityNET's Deep Funding program in its round 2 in the tooling pool. I'm working in a team of 4 people. My fantastic colleagues are Joanna, Kenrick, and William. And the topic of our project is the calculation of community contribution scores, or in other words, how to quantify how active and constructive members of the community are in the Deep Funding program, but later on in the wider SingularityNET ecosystem. I myself am working on a software tool that shall help the Deep Funding team immediately, while Joanna is working on the specification of a future product that is more extensive, and William is doing a review of academic literature and existing best practices to put it all onto a theoretically solid grounding, and Kenrick is managing and coordinating the project. To give you a bit more background, Deep Funding is about incentivizing and supporting people to develop AI services and publish them on the SingularityNET platform. The decision who is awarded is not done in a centralized manner, but by a community that everybody can be part of. And the question for such a community governance process becomes whose voices shall have what weight in the overall decision process. And basically there are 2 main inputs for this question. On the one hand, there are AGIX token holders, so the utility token for the SingularityNET platform. And on the other hand, there is a proposal portal where everybody can become active by discussing the projects that are put onto the platform in a particular round. If you're interested in the details of the community governance, I can recommend taking a look at the update section of the Deep Funding website, where you find a lot of articles, and a very early one is explicitly about community governance, where Jan Horlings laid out the overall goals for the process, which is that everybody shall be able to participate, the activity of the people shall also be rewarded, and the entire process shall remain transparent and fair. And this last point is part of the reason why we are developing the software tool in our project, because the calculation of contribution scores shall be correctly implemented, and at the same time it shall be clear which variables go into the calculation. In addition to this article, I can recommend 3 other ones where Deep Funding Round 1, Governance Round 1 and Deep Funding Round 2 are discussed, and there you can see how the Deep Funding team has calculated contribution scores by hand, which was done in spreadsheets that became increasingly complex, and that's a second reason why we are developing this software tool to relieve the deep funding team from this burden and to do it automatically with code. As you can see here, there were different variables that went into the contribution scores. For example, users received points for writing comments and also for receiving positive reactions to them, but they were subtracted points if they received negative reactions to them. And at the end, users were ranked by their overall score and put into different groups or tiers, as Jan called them. Here are 7 different, fuck me. In addition to this article, I can recommend that the lower rewards. So that's the basic calculations that were done by hand up till deep funding round 2. Now, with all that background information, let's take a look at the proposal portal of Deep Funding, which is powered by a company called Sway. If you go on there, you can look at active missions and past missions. And I was talking about Deep Funding round 1, for example, where there were 2 different missions, and the first was called round 1 pool A, the second mission was called round 1 pool B. So let's take a look at this mission, and we will see that one mission can contain a lot of proposals. In this case, let's look at the accepted proposals, where for example SetRush was a nice proposal. We can take a further look, and what we will see here is that one proposal can contain a lot of comments. So first there is the proposal text, and then at the bottom of the page you can see the discussion that the community took part of. Every user was able to write comments, and then you were able to give reactions in form of thumbs up, thumbs down, or a set of different smileys. And a positive reaction would be a thumbs up or a positive smiley, and a negative reaction would be thumbs down and a negative smiley. Now, another thing that users could do is vote or rate the proposal, and you can see here that different users gave different ratings for this proposal. One aspect that I also want to mention is that it was possible to either write a comment for the proposal or to reply to an existing comment, so there's some structure in the comment section. Now, all of the data that you have seen on the proposal portal and how I modeled it is also available in a data export that SingularityNET can receive at any time from Sway. And what Sway provides is a single zip file with a lot of different JSON files. And here again we can see there is a JSON file for missions, there's one for proposals, one for the users, one for comments, one for, let's see, reactions like upvotes, downvotes, and the smileys. And then you can also have ratings or votes, as they call them. Now, these JSON files are what is sometimes called semi-structured data, because the missions inside them, for example, are objects that do not always have the same attributes. So one mission might have certain attributes and another mission might have a different set of attributes. But what I wanted to do is to bring this data into a very structured format. That's why I developed this entity relationship diagram and why I implemented a process that converts the whole data into a single SQLite database where every object has each of these attributes certainly given. At this point I want to jump into a quick code section where I can show you what I've implemented so far. I've written a simple Python package called CCS for community contribution scores, And at the moment it is possible to use this package from a so-called JupyTer notebook, but later on I will implement a simple web server where the Deep Funding team can use it from a front end with a simple user interface. So what you can do with this package is you get the raw zip data from Sway and you can convert it into a SQLite database with a simple one-line command that hides a lot of complexity, and the output looks like this. It's a database which is file-based and which you can inspect with a tool called DB Browser for SQLite. And what we can see in there is, for example, there are these different tables, and one table called missions contains all the mission data. So each mission has a certain ID, was created by a certain user. We can sort it by time and you can see all the titles. For example, here is Deep Funding Round 1. This was Governance Round 1, and these missions were part of Deep Funding Round 2. Now, what we want to do for the community contribution scores, there is also an option that you can export the same data in form of Excel spreadsheets, so the tables of the database just become sheets in the spreadsheet. But what we want to do now for Deep Funding is we want to filter down the data. So let's say we only want to contain missions that belong to round 2 and also just proposals, comments, users and so on that were active during this round. This can be seen if I reload the database. There come additional views, and here you can see all missions that belonged to round 2, all proposals that were part of the missions that belonged to round 2, and so on. The next thing we want to do is we want to count the user activities within this filtered view. So which user created how many comments, how many reactions did the user create, how many reactions did the user receive, and so on. This is done by yet another one-line command that hides a lot of complexity, and the result is that there is now an additional table in the database which is ending in the counts, and you can see here all these different counts, how many ratings a user received for his proposals, how many comments he created, and so on. And then the next step is calculate the actual contribution scores, and as I showed you on the blog of Deep Funding, the team used certain variables for it and might want to change them in future. So for example, creating a comment gave you 3 points during Deep Funding round 2, but maybe in a future round you want to have less focus on that and more on the number of comments that you received for your own proposals or something like that. So let's calculate contribution scores based on these variables, and again in the database you will find that there is a new table with the scores in it. So the total contribution scores are the sum of the scores for the individual activities times the variables, a simple linear combination, and here you have concrete values. And the nice thing is that these values are exactly the same that the Deep Funding team created with a very complex spreadsheet. We can also visualize this. I have extracted the main data from this spreadsheet. So these are the values that were part of the spreadsheet by the Deep Funding team. And as you can see, they are identical. It's also possible to take a look at it visually. So this bar chart shows on the x-axis the users ranked by according to their contribution scores, and the y-axis shows you the contribution scores. For example, 2 users had very high scores above a value of 2000. That's these 2 ones. And with the tool, it is possible to visualize the same thing. Takes a short moment, but not too long, and the two plots are identical, just as the entries in the database and in the spreadsheet are identical. Now, based on the contribution scores themselves, or based on the ranking that these contribution scores impose onto the users, you can calculate rewards. And this is what the Deep Funding team did by putting users into different groups. So let's visualize that. Takes a moment to plot. Here you see the HEIX rewards that the users received, and some bars are missing because these were users that belonged to SingularityNET. I think this one was Jan and this might have been Peter, but I'm not sure now. And the second form of reward, as I mentioned in the beginning, was that users will receive more voice in the voting process. So they received, for example, 5 times improved voice in the voting process, where it is decided which proposals are granted with funding and which ones are not. And we've decided that with the tool we can do that in a different way. So for example, we can use a linear function so that users get gradually decreasing amount of HEIX rewards and gradually decreasing voting weight. But it's also possible not to use just a linear function. You can also use, for example, an expression like to the power of 3 or an exponential function. And what's also important, it's also possible to filter out different users, like, for example, removing Jan. Sorry, something happened here. Yeah, should work now. Just a short moment and we should receive the updated calculations. Now you have more HEIX rewards given to the users that had high contribution scores, and with the exponential function you would give voting power only to the very top contributors. Now, another way to look at the data is not to do simple counting and multiplying by variables, but you could also interpret the data as networks, and then you could see, for example, a network that on the first sight looks very complex but actually isn't. I make it bigger so it becomes easier. I have filtered the data so that you only see one mission, and in this case it's the mission round 1 pool A, which is the blue dot here, and this mission contains a lot of proposals which are shown by red dots here. For example, here is the anti-fake news analytic apps, which was awarded in round 2, if I remember correctly. Now, associated with the proposal, as I've mentioned, are comments, and they are shown here as pink dots, and one comment would be this one. This comment received a reaction in form of an upvote, which is shown here as a light green circle. And the user who has written that comment was Matthew Halloran, which you can also see on the Deep Funding portal itself. So this is just a different way how you can look at the data, and I filtered it so it's still easy to interpret. And what you can do with such a network visualization is you can calculate so-called centrality values, which stand for the importance or the influence that a certain node has in a network. These measures come from the mathematical discipline of graph theory, and there is a lot of different measures available, and they are, for example, used in web search engines. So you might have heard of PageRank by Google. This is how a network measure which they use to rank websites, and those with the highest centralities according to PageRank are shown prominently in the search results. So what you see here is the same network, but this time the nodes have a size that corresponds to their centrality, and what you might see here is this big green node which belongs to the user Jan Horlings, who is part of the Deep Funding team, and he has received a lot of centrality in this calculation because he has written The last few seconds were cut off, but basically I was just explaining the last network that you have seen there. So the bottom line of that last visualization was instead of just counting, you could do these network measures, and then you would get contribution scores that take into consideration how the comments and users are linked to each other, not just what an individual user did during a mission.
Just make
Already?
applause. I love it. I love it. This will make our lives so much easier, Raphael. So we have to thank these guys.
It's a second. This is quite impressive. Really good work, Robert.
Thank you. I also wanted to apologize for the swear words that snuck in there. I thought I had cut them out.
No, this was really good. This made it really human.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, Robert, that was a fabulous presentation. In the comments, I see people are wondering whether they can get a hold of either the notebook in order to get an interactive experience, or maybe even some screen captures.
There is a little issue with sharing all the work that I've done so far, and there is some private data in the dataset that shouldn't be shared publicly. So I can prepare definitely something to share, but I need to to ensure, for example, that user emails are not exposed and other private information, but I can definitely share the work. And I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's planned to be open sourced, but I'm not perfectly sure yet. That's not my decision, so.
That's great stuff. Rojo, you have your hand up.
Yes. First of all, congratulations. Great work.
Thank you.
I have 2 points that I wanted to comment on. I love the ETL, and I also love the visualization. It was really nice. Sorry, let me close the window. All right. So I had mainly 2 questions that I was wondering about. The first one was about data visualization and interaction, basically providing a more interactive experience for community members. And I was wondering if you were thinking about using tools like Streamlit, which work perfectly with what you're doing right now, or other tools, not specifically Streamlit. That's one. The second one, I was wondering if it was possible to actually create a pipeline out of this process, where we can do this as the things are, or as the comments and the interactions are coming to the platform, we can do it as we go, basically. And maybe I can add another question. Sorry for the many questions. But I was thinking, or I was wondering if you had any idea how you could implement things like GPT, for example, or other algorithms, AI algorithms into the process. Getting sentiment analysis or something, I don't know, like anything out of the data, basically.
Okay, thank you for the questions. So I do not know Streamlight or Streamlit personally, so I'm not sure how you can use it. Is it for graph data or for SQLite data?
It works like magic. The process that you're doing in Python, with a couple of lines, you will be able to do this visualization over the web, where people can interact with your data set without having access to it. Check it out. It's a really good tool.
Yeah, I will take a look at it. Thanks. The second point, it's definitely possible to build pipelines out of it. The only problem we have now is that we rely on a manual data export from Sway. But in future, when SingularityNET has the WordPress plugin and the proposals over there, it might be possible to automate parts of the process. And I think I forgot forgotten your third question. What was it again?
It was about the usage of AI, whether it's GPT or
right.
simple sentiment analysis kind of algorithms, this kind of thing.
Yeah, that's true. That was taken into consideration in the ETL process. So just for the things that we did here for the point calculation, you wouldn't have needed all the data that's available in the JSON files. But I decided to take over as much as possible. For example, if in future we want to use the proposal texts, comment texts, and so on, and do sentiment analysis as you suggested, or different forms of analysis. So it's kind of future-proof. You have the data that was generated and you can re-evaluate it later. But yeah, it's definitely a possibility to not... currently, we are quite quantification heavy, I would say. So we are counting, and that's easily gameable. But in future, we might to focus more on finding out the quality of content that was produced by users. So one thing that we do now is we see these reactions by community members to the content that other community members created. That's a qualitative aspect, but in future we might also use AI tools partly for that. I mean, you run into questions of biases that these tools definitely have as well, but you can always try to balance it out with using different tools, having human oversight and things like that.
Thanks a lot for the feedback. I will be a little bit more selfish and ask another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm very sorry. I was also wondering, so it's a beautiful solution. I like how the way how it was implemented in SQL. One problem that I might see with it is the centralization of SQL. So the hosting of this database will be, you can have multiple copies of it for sure, but it will be at the end a centralized solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if, again, this is in the beginning of the solution. I love it and it should continue this way, but perhaps later in the future, working with things like Cassandra and decentralized, working with distributed systems, distributed databases rather than just a simple SQL. There are some distributed SQLs specifically for Postgres that could be used. But yeah, this is just a suggestion. It's not.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. So if you really take the decentralization aspect to the maximum, then you would also like to have the data and the calculation processes not at a single place, but distributed over the whole community, ideally. I mean, that's definitely a thing to think about in future rounds, but currently we try to build these tools mainly to relieve the deep funding team from doing the stuff manually and to ensure that the calculations are really correct and reproducible. But it's really an interesting thing to look into ways how you could decentralize these calculations. I think there is also potential there in cryptographic methods like homomorphic encryption and stuff like that, if you want to make calculations without seeing the data and stuff like that. Or maybe you could also obfuscate the data before you store it so that user emails are not available. And yeah, there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, homomorphic encryption is my bread and butter. So hopefully in the
Nice.
future, perhaps we can work on such solution.
Sounds great. Yeah, I think Jan raised his hand and then Felix, or I'm...
Yeah, I was thinking if people are interested and also thinking about Chris here in the call, I could give a little bit more context about the solution and the vision behind it and the way we see it evolve. And about your comment, Rojo, on making it transparent. There's always this balance between privacy and transparency. So indeed, we would like to hide the data that is in there. If we can make the program as such and the algorithms transparent, yeah, that would be great. Please take into account where we are coming from, what the situation is right now. That is just me making a very complex Excel sheet that I have troubles to understand myself if I haven't looked at it for a week. So this is a huge improvement from where we are. And it also opens up possibilities for further improvements. So it's not just a time saver, but let me first go to Felix, and then if there's time and desire, I can wrap it up with some more context.
directly follows what you just mentioned, Jan. Like, what's the next step on this? Because this was the proof of concept, I assume. So I hope you're planning for MVP later, version 1 maybe. Do you have plans to move this forward? Because I think it's insanely good stuff here and really deserves continuation. What's your take on that? What do you plan?
Yeah, the specification of a future product is actually a dedicated point in our project, which Joanna is heading. So she's collecting feature requests by Deep Funding, but also by other projects in the SingularityNET ecosystem. And we are thinking beyond that, maybe creating a tool that is also useful in different contexts outside of SingularityNET. And I mean, straightforward is that we could also integrate data from the voting portal and reward that and directly link the voting weights that we calculate from the sway data so that the results from the voting portal is boosted by the voting weights. And that would, again, relieve the Deep Funding team of some manual calculations. But beyond that, we started to think about what could be the commonalities between different other projects in SingularityNET. I mean, there is definitely potential for calculating contributions among different platforms like Rejuve, or I think Jan has a much better picture in mind, which parts of the ecosystem, or SDAO and so on. So yeah, we are planning ahead for an MVP and beyond that, and Joanna might be the best person to give an overview of the thinking that's happening there.
Yeah, I'd love to take that challenge. Contribution scores, as we're now calling them, we used to call them reputation scores, but maybe that has a wrong flavor around it. Contribution scores, I think, will be an essential ingredient towards decentralization. The problem why a lot of DAOs these days don't work is because we started out with the idea that it would all be based on tokens and the amount of tokens that you have. And there are always whales, and even if you do quadratic voting and that kind of stuff, it might still be very unbalanced. So the way I see this tool going forward is indeed an open source tool. That can be used first by Deep Funding, and it will, I hope, already be used in round 3 of Deep Funding. And maybe we will have to adjust our feature set a little bit to be aligned with the tool. But I gladly do that because it gives so much other benefits, and then from that moment on we can build it out again. But also we talked briefly about SingCom DAO, our decentralization structure. It would be enormously valuable to have a system that understands what people are contributing to, and also maybe what their area of expertise is. That way we can make much more balanced approaches in decision making and in determining who will be able to join in which committee or layer or whatever. So in general, I see this as a really important tool. If I make it a little bit more concrete, so I think contribution scores are just as good as the number of attributes that are covered and consumed by it. So if your contribution score only covers the amount of tokens that you hold, then it's shit. Excusez my French. If it has tokens, but maybe some behavior behind it, like voting or whatever, it's already better. If it has all that plus your behavior on a platform like we have our proposal platform, and how many proposals you have submitted, how many comments you've made, how your comments have been awarded and reviewed by other people, then it becomes better. It becomes even better if we can also add things like being present in meetings like this one, that would also, in the future, in my perspective, will give you some contribution score. So I hope we'll have a lot of sources there, and I hope that the tool eventually will become flexible enough for us and other people using the tools to configure that, to say, here I have a source file, and here are a number of, in a pre-formatted way perhaps, here are a number of activities that are in this source file, and this variable has this weight, and this variable has this weight for my contribution score. And then also on the outside, so this is input, also on the output, it's not one-dimensional. It's not that you need to have one contribution score. You can have different, I as a person can have different contribution scores for different things. I always use the example, I can have a score for awards, for getting awarded what I did in the last round. Now, in that case, you make a score that only looks at what you did in the previous 3 months or something, or in the last round. If I want to use the contribution score to determine an extra weight factor on my vote, so voting is still done based on tokens, but we can weight that, we can give it an extra weight for your contribution score, as we did. Then I don't want to look at just this last period. I want to look at the last year or the last 2 years. But then I wanted to degrade, because maybe what I did the last half year should count a little bit more than what I did 3 years ago. And I can think of other situations that would require yet other calculations of a contribution score. You can also divide it per topic, for instance. So the potential and the possibilities are endless here. And that is the kind of flexibility this tool should ultimately have. And one thing that we didn't touch, well, Robert mentioned it in his own way on centricity. A very important aspect on reputation systems as we see them at SingularityNET is that it's what's it called? Liquid and weighted. Meaning that if I give Robert's comment a 5 out of 5 stars, and somebody else does it also, then it can still be that this other person's comment will count higher because he has a higher contribution score than I have. So that way it will flow through the whole system. I told at the beginning of this meeting about our new platform, I made a comment about contribution scores. I can imagine that we will also visualize that in our platform, that if a comment is made by somebody with a very high score, that it will float more to the surface. Or that if somebody gives positive feedback, and that person has a very high contribution score, it will count more than somebody who's just new on the platform. Same for reviews and ratings that we will build in the platform. And the best thing about such a contribution score is that it has so many parameters. So all the things that I'm telling now about usage, you can think of a use case why it would be detrimental. So if I say people with a high contribution, the comments with a high contribution score will float to the top, then somebody will tell, well, that means that people who have a high contribution score determine everything, and new people can't determine anything. And sometimes a new person can have really good insights, maybe even because he's new. But the nice thing about contribution scores and the way you're using it is that you can tweak it. So you can say, we want to have 5 high-level visible comments of people with a high contribution score, but we also always want to have 2 new ones there. Or we will calculate it in a different way, or we will only look at certain aspects or whatever. So also there, the possibilities are endless if we have a sufficiently flexible tool. Now, the way that we have been doing this on Deep Funding is we didn't wait for a tool to start it. We just started it without a tool, with a simple spreadsheet. But that has limitations. We can make errors, and this liquid thing for sure would not be possible. That would be a nightmare. But now we land on this tool, and that means we can build it out, and we can improve it, and we can tweak it. And yeah, I'm sure it will be a very, very useful and important tool for deep funding. Hopefully also for SingularityNET and specifically SingComDAO, whatever shape that will take. But I also hope outside of our community. And I would love for everybody to use it and to benefit from that, the whole wider ecosystem. Am I talking too much, guys? I'm getting swept away here a little bit.
Oh, no, usual doors, don't worry.
Anybody fallen asleep? Or I have one other very different topic, Robert, if I may. I think it connects to this. One other tool that we're creating, a very small, nifty tool, is a wallet linking tool. And one challenge that we will have is that we have now people on Sway, and later on we'll have people on WordPress doing things. And these people can be the same people in some cases, in many cases. And we would like to link their scores so they can continue to build up on what they already had. So do you see a role there for the wallet linking tool as well, to be connected to the contribution score?
In the Sway data, there was a complexity with users being identified by different means. Some users were identified by email address, others were identified by their MetaMask login. So it would definitely help to have a user ID that's somewhat unified across all users that might get contribution scores. That's always helpful if you can uniquely identify persons and don't have to make matches that might fail sometimes, that are conditional on what data is available and stuff like that. So I think the wallet linking tool and using that as a unique identifier would definitely help for all the future work, especially once you try to integrate the voting portal data and the Sway data, because that's quite tricky at the moment, since the voting portal data can contain Cardano addresses and Ethereum addresses, while the Sway data can contain emails, Ethereum addresses, and Cardano addresses, but the Cardano addresses are not ensured to be correct, and so it goes on. So bringing a system into this that's reliable early on would be a good idea, and I think for the MVP that would already be relevant to include the wallet linking tool. And as soon as you want to use such a tool across different projects in SingularityNET, it would definitely help if you can say this user in that project is the same as that user in that other project, if that's desired. I mean, it could also be a feature that's not desired. I'm not entirely sure about that.
Yeah, but you at least have the option then, right? So
that's right, yes.
Yeah, I think it would help the adoption across the ecosystem as well, if you can use multiple blockchains and have IDs and connect IDs that way, while the user is still being in charge. And the wallet linking tool will connect wallets from different blockchains to one collection ID, and you can say, this is me. And you don't have to do any KYC or anything, but you can say all these wallets belong to me. So also all these reputation scores belong to me. And yeah, that opens up yet a whole new worlds of opportunities, what we can do with a tool like this one. So what we aim to do is to do some more work on that tool. Make sure that for instance, we can have a hash or something that would be a representation of your collection ID, and then you could add that hash to both Sway and to WordPress. Sway already has some kind of field for that we could use, and so it's a little bit of manual work, but that way we could easily connect it, and then it's also connected with the voting portal integrated there, etc. I see a lot of hands up, so I'll shut up.
Just a short note, the hashing that you mentioned is a good idea and straightforward for if we want to ensure that email addresses are not leaked and stuff like that. Probably I should use that in the proof of concept as well.
Cool.
I think Felix raised his hand first and then Raphael, if I've seen it correctly.
Oh, Rafa can go
I
first.
agree.
As well.
Don't be shy, Felix. Come on, go on.
Just because what you spoke about smells pretty much already as a SSI or the ID in this regard. And there is some pretty awesome work done in the Cardano ecosystem. I put a link here. Maybe you heard about it already, NMaker. They're actually the first one who issued the ID actually in this regard, which is linked to wallet as well as social media's account and everything together with AI Mix. Most of the stuff is open sourced, a lot of good code there. Maybe have a look on this and see what maybe can be helpful there for you too. But it's already running, it's up, and yeah, might be helpful for you.
That's also an interesting suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, Robert, congratulations on the development, you and the whole team. It's unbelievable. When we see the background, the back end of the thing, what we have and what you are doing now, it's really interesting and important. One thing, one question that I have that is very correlated to what was being said before, priorly, on the wallets, and perhaps it's answered already, is from the operations perspective, something very important, it's the payment itself, because we reward the contributions itself, right? So people that goes to the portal and contribute receive rewards. So what are the hurdles that you see now to go forward with some solution or feature like this that we can anticipate and correct for the new iterations of this contribution score application?
Yeah, so what I can say about the HEIX rewards is that I've shown Jan used this grouping scheme where each user was put into a tier and then each user of the tier got exactly the same amount, which is easier to calculate in the first place and then also easier to distribute. Because if each user receives a different HEIX amount, as I've shown in the plot with the linear and exponential functions and stuff like that, then it gets really tiresome if you have to distribute it by hand. But Jan also mentioned that there is some existing infrastructure where you can semi-automate payment. So it would definitely be possible to produce an output that fits to that other tool, and then you can have human oversight that looks over the output that is generated, if the addresses are correct, if the amounts seem correct, and then you might be able to automatically distribute the rewards. But that's depending on how well this other infrastructure allows to automate it. If that's not so easily possible, then it might be interesting to perhaps go back to such a step function and put users into groups. Then it's less error prone and less tiresome if you do it by hand. Maybe Jan can say a few words about that.
Sorry, I was completely immersed in the Felix link, but I have some clue what you're talking about.
It was about the HEIX reward distribution, whether we can automate it perhaps already in the POC.
Yeah, that would be great. So if you can only export a CSV file, then we have a CSV format for that we use together with Amazon to make the payments, and then we can just do that. As we discussed before, Robert, there's one catch there, is that we don't have proper Cardano address of everybody who is collecting reputation at this moment. And sometimes we get it later, sometimes we might not get it. And so the tool ideally should have some memory, so that we have create a balance for everybody. And then for those that do have a Cardano address, they will be put on the sheet, and we will make the payments. I don't know. Yeah, if you think about it, it starts to be complex. Maybe you need to have a feedback mechanism to check if the payments are actually done, and then we can reduce their reserve, their balance with that amount. That would be kind of the ideal scenario. On the short term, just having an export on a CSV would already be a big help, but it would require us to keep track of collected reputation points or contribution points versus spent.
Yeah, I see. I mean, it's easy to output it just as a spreadsheet and as a CSV, and in the CSV just entries are put that have addresses that at least have correct format for a Cardano address. And then in the spreadsheet you see who has not provided an address yet and who should receive the reward in future. I think that would be a pragmatic, easy solution for now. So you have the CSV with the users with the addresses that can be paid out, and then you have the spreadsheet that can be read easily by a human, where all the other users and amounts are stored for future disbursements. I wouldn't...
That would for sure be a big help. And then let's think about, Raphael, how we can best keep track for now of collected reputation points that have not been disbursed in awards. That's not the hardest part of everything we're doing. So this is really, really something, a tool that makes our life a lot easier. And also makes the whole system more resilient and reliable, and that's probably more important than our lives, but in that aspect. But these awards, these reputation awards, it should be something that you can rely on, that you can count on. And by having a tool like that, even if the tool itself is still decentralized or centralized, we can open source the code to some extent and the algorithm. We will publish the variables that we will choose for a certain round. We may change that from round to round a little bit. I think that will be a benefit, not just for us, but also for the rest of the community. Rojo.
I want to deviate a little bit and share something that I've witnessed this week. That will perhaps remind us why we're doing this and why people are here. So a couple of days ago, I think 2 days ago, I went to this seminar that was by deputy head of a lab of Microsoft that is working on AI and ethics. And in this presentation, it was made clear that Microsoft, amongst others, are actively working with governments to restrict access to AI. Might be a shock for some, but it is a reality. Other things that were shared are some filters that are being added to GBT based on the whims and the decisions of a couple of people. I believe what we're doing here is very important because we are the force, some of the few left, basically, that will make sure that the general population will have access to these tools. Otherwise, it will be 2, 3, 4 companies controlling your access. You'll be just developing tools on top of something that exists. You do not control the source. And the day when they will decide, they will turn it off, just like electricity or water in your house. And you'll be left with nothing. I think it's very important what we're doing here. And we should make sure that we stay decentralized. We stay on our mission. And we develop much better tools than what these people have. They do have a lot of people working for them. They do have a lot of money behind them, that's for sure. But we have some brilliant minds. I mean, look at Robert. As young as he is, I'm young too, but we have young Robert, we have professors here, we have thinkers, engineers, philosophers, and all these things. It's very important. And as long as we focus on our mission and we share it with others, I'm pretty sure we will get some very, very smart people in these teams. And they will develop so much complex stuff that we can't even fathom at this point. And thanks a lot, everyone, for being here. I truly appreciate it.
Those are very true words that fit right into the mission and the raison d'etre of SingularityNET. So you're so right. You're so right. Which is also why we're now giving a push to further decentralization of the organization in the SingComDAO initiative, which unfortunately was delayed for some weeks, but we're very serious about that. I know Ben is extremely serious about that. He sees that threat as no other. He really sees that as a serious threat that, yeah, AI or other things will be shielded from people, or institutions will try to control it. And we believe that freedom and openness, also in AI, is the best guarantee to keep it on a beneficial path for everybody and not just for a few. So that's also why we have initiatives like NewNet that decentralize the computing layer, and Hypercycle, and others like that, because it's not just the governance that we need to decentralize, but also the whole technology stack. So yeah, it's important, and it's more important than ever. Thank you.
It's a really important note to mention when using tokens for any contribution or reputation systems, don't base so much on monetized tokens as AGIX, for example, in this regard. There were many attempts already into this direction, different blockchains, and it always leads to a very tricky direction when you link monetized core tokens to reputational contribution systems, which then move forward into governance systems. It always leads to some sort of oligarchy, plutocracy, whatnot, in one or another way. Would really love to stress out, the fuck, mint the deep funding token, start to experiment. But it's really quite dangerous actually to use strong ecosystem, let's say monetized and value token for any of the systems. Especially on the long run.
Reputation and AGIX are two very different things. Contribution score and AGIX are two very different things. In the end, we might have a kind of mix that we say contribution score counts for 80% when you're voting, and your AGIX count for 20%, but they are separated, and your reputation score or contribution score, whatever you want to call it, should not be, what's the word for it? Fungible. It should not be transferable. It's yours. So that is why tokenizing it is not my main concern at this moment. It might be helpful at some point if we want to have added transparency, so all these transactions that Robert is now catching could be put to the blockchain. But then immediately the question is, how does that balance with privacy, and what do you value most in this world? So this is also a very fundamental question that requires deep thought and a lot of discussion to see where how we should balance those two, or have the best of both worlds, perhaps. But yeah, warning taken, Felix, and yeah, I think on the side of SingularityNET and contribution systems, yeah, we're safe here, at least for now. Yeah, there are other ways, right? So we talked in the past about you can also have a contribution score, reputation score for AI services. But then you have a whole different mechanism, and there you can maybe stake your money on a certain service to show that you trust that service, and then actually AGIX might come into the mix. But that's a whole other different utility of contribution scores. Anyone? Thank you, Rojo, and thank you for your contributions as well. And thank you, Robert, for doing all this work. I really deeply appreciate it. And like Felix said somewhere in the chat, this is really funding very well spent. So I hope we can continue that journey, and I'm personally determined to make sure that you will have the possibility to create more layers and eventually develop this into a fully mature tool that is not just functional for deep funding, but for the whole ecosystem.
Thank you very much. I think Chris wanted also to say something.
Chris.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Yeah. So it's just something I was thinking about when I was looking into Singularity over recent weeks. You know, maybe it's something that could be considered as part of the DAO process. Has anyone ever thought of a governance specific token, such as, let's give an example, AGIX. So for example, the rewards could be issued in this specific governance token, which may be easier to, maybe the calculations for yourself, Robert, you know, when it comes to the rewards payment for use within the ecosystem for voting proposals and such.
I think, Felix, this is your cue to talk about gimbals. Or somebody else.
I would love somebody else, actually. I'm quite sure they have some good opinions around.
I can take a bite at it. Well, the story started when Felix said that we can use this very nice token called Gimbal that was used in basically Catalyst Swarm. I don't know if you're familiar with it. So they have been using this token to recognize contributions from basically from community members. And when the Ambassador program, SingularityNET Ambassador program is not established, but let's say structured properly, we did implement the Gimbal token to reward contribution. It doesn't have an intrinsic value, so you cannot exchange it for money, but it does have this recognition value. And as you said, it can be used for voting. The only problem with that is that Gimbal is shared with Swarm. It's the same token. So there is some experimentation going on currently to have another token that will basically mirror what was rewarded before, and it will be reflected in community members' wallets. And then we use that as a SingularityNET specific governance token, based on what you do as a community member.
That is pretty much word for word the idea that I was having in my head.
Also, in regard to governance token, the token itself, I mean, we're on the blockchain space. When we think about a transaction, we have to redefine what is a transaction actually. The token itself is not the value. The information which you attach to the metadata is the actual value. The token itself doesn't play that much a role. It's actually just a tracer token, which allows you to move information from, let's say, normal engagements on the blockchain. And to say, oh, okay, which metadata do we actually want to adjust there actually? And that's the massive value on it. You can use pretty much any token what you want. It's in Cardano, you can set up a native asset in 5 minutes. That's really not a problem. Though figuring out for what exact reason you want to use the token, that's really the tricky part. And really this transactional value that you say, the real value of a blockchain is not forcefully the transaction. It's that you are able to build an on-chain library, which is immutable. And when you speak about contribution and reputation, then you need this backbone. So making sure, and in this regard, you don't see blockchain as an accounting system, you see it more as a library, right? We say, oh, okay, we are able to capture engagements, contributions, move it from Discord, Zoom, whatever platform on the blockchain, have it available there, start to gather the data. It will be there forever, and now you can use it, right? But the token itself is not so important, actually. It's really just the whole environment which you build around, and especially the metadata.
So this has one downside I'm just thinking about, because I see also the chat. Suppose in a Black Mirror-like future, SingularityNET will be forbidden and will be called like controversial or something. And then it's your wallet address, but if that could be linked to your identity, will be linked with all the activity that you have been doing. And this is maybe a bit far-fetched right now, but suppose that you are living today in a country which doesn't has such high standards where freedom of thought is concerned, then maybe you don't want to have all your contributions laid down. By the way, that is a reason why also for the wallet linking tool we see that there might be a very good opportunity to have multiple identities. You have your professional identity, you have your alternative demonstrating, how shall I call it, identity, and maybe your decentralized one, I don't know. And you can collect value on all of them. Rojo.
Go for it, Felix.
Can I quickly respond to this?
Yeah, I wanted to respond to that. So it is quite dystopic what you're describing, yeah. But to be honest, it's not that far-fetched when you look at what some of politicians say. One thing I want to make clear is that if any government want to get your identity from your wallet, they will. There is no other way. There is no, I mean, you can already see it with hackers. I mean, there is no one better than hiding their identity than hackers. They still figure out their names and where they're from. We have to make peace with that. The only thing we can do is to make this as popular as it's possible. This should be the new internet, where everyone is like basically thinking that it's no, you cannot ban the internet. For if I tell any one of you that a government is planning to ban the internet, it's just not thinkable. Just no, it's impossible, right? This should be the new internet. But if you want to make yourself a little bit hidden and you make your wallet anonymized, that's not possible. A lot of blockchains claim to do something similar to that. I would say it's nearly impossible. If a government wants you, who's holding wallet number, blah, 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 they will get you. Simple.
Yeah, or to have a thread online that connects your identity to everything you've done for a certain blockchain, maybe also connected to Read AI or Otter AI that give full transcription of everything you said, etc. It's also a bit scary, right?
It is. It is quite scary. That's why I recommend people to anonymize themselves as much as possible. I mean, saying that people can get you doesn't mean that you shouldn't actually anonymize yourself. Make it hard for anyone who's trying to get you to get you. Anonymization is always good, especially when you're dealing with crypto. It's not just government. I mean, there are scammers. There are a lot of scammers in this space. So keeping yourself secure, securing your wallet, separating wallets that interact with centralized exchanges and and decentralized ones. All of these are good habits to have when you're in this decentralized system.
Actually, also to this point, we had we started to develop this token 2 years ago, and we had so many brainstorms and working sessions on how to protect people and whatnot. The conclusion was you can't. It's up to the individual. The most important thing is which information do you request from people. For example, in Ambassador's Guild, how it works also right now, in the whole treasury system, we only ask for 2 sources, your Discord handle and the wallet address. Now it's up to you to name your name in Discord, like is this your official name or is it Cran? Like Crandano, the guy here with the robot head, is since the first day in the Ambassador's program. I never saw him on camera, I have fucking no idea who he is. But I know that I trust him because I can track back his engagements on chain on a very early stage. And I don't need any more, actually. I don't want the email address and phone number and this and that. I think that's mostly it. When it comes to anonymity and protecting people, it's first their responsibility. And I think this is also one of the major promises of blockchain, right? Self-sovereignty comes not with an entity which can protect everybody. Taking responsibility and taking the initiative to say, hey, okay, I take charge of this is much more important than any really well-defined system, which in the end, anyway, tracks all information from the user's life. It's really to the individual at the end. And it was so funny that we had almost 2 years of brainstorming and shitload of stuff. And in the end, conclusion, everybody agree. Yeah, it's the individual. Like, Sorry, Guillermo, you had your hand up.
Hi everyone. Yeah, well, thank you for all the issues, and Robert for the amazing displacement of technology that will help Jan and our team. That's great and shows the results from the last round, tangible. First that, and then jump on the subject. There's a thin line on this, Felix, Rojo. We always end up on the same subject as you mentioned, and then we don't lose this fear. This is a personal approach of scalability. We don't lose that fear, and we understand that we are already exposed through the internet, and as Roger mentioned, if anyone wants to know who's the owner of that wallet, it will. If we don't lose that fear to have a clear exposure of and lose how you say this in proper English, the anonimato of the profile behind. This technology will not scale to do the impact it needs on the time frame we have to have a social sustainable, bring social sustainable results for the whole. I'm all in for people not knowing who I am or who's behind all of this ideas or profits. But at the same time, is what it's limiting the technology. It's all about regulations. It's all about walking, and you see all the big people, all the big builders, ending in governments, sitting with and doing lobby at the end. So at the end, for all of us to have this scale and bring the impact we need to lose this kind of fear. That's a personal thought.
A good example for that would be Bitcoin in Canada. So there were some protesters, and the government basically blocked their bank account, which is one of the dystopic things that can happen. And what happens is that it just made Bitcoin way more popular in Canada than it was before. So again, we can, as you said, we can live in fear, or we can just say no. I mean, I don't agree with that. And if enough people hear the message, that's it. I mean, what is a government anyway? It's a coalition of people. If you have enough people in your coalition, you win. That's it. That's how it's played.
Okay, so let me just add to the conversation here. So the problem we have is not actually lack of technology. I think we've grown a lot in terms of technology, in terms of the blockchain, and not only blockchain, like technology generally, that if we want to build something that can create like make us anonymous in the internet, it's possible. The problem generally is not that lack of technology. I think Walter actually wrote on the comment when he said, we have Tor, for example, and it's been anonymized for years and it's been functioning. So it's obvious, and we have a lot of technologies, zero knowledge technologies, a whole lot that can be done. The big problem is of technology, the blockchain, and of our era is actually regulations and how they have the capacity to impede technology. And the thing is, technology does not exist in a vacuum. It exists under a premise, right? So, and if that premise expects that technology be open at any point in time when it is needed, then no matter how much anonymity we try to create online, when the regulations or the regulatory bodies determine that for this particular point, we want it to be open, then because technology is not existing in a vacuum, it has to exist somewhere. And when so when it exists under that particular space, it becomes subjected to the laws of that particular place where it actually exists. So I think that's where the problem is, and I think we're not going to escape this problem any soon.
I would also assume that's a age-old problem of humanity, after all. Since the first hammer, first axe was built, a tool is a tool, and you can use it either way. You can use a hammer to build a house, and you can use a hammer to smash somebody's head. Like, it's up to you at the end, right? And it's pretty sure that the stuff what we built here will be used by dictators. That's already the case, right? And CBDCs are coming, and China's doing already some funny stuff there in this regard. I think that's a responsibility we should keep in mind on some sort, that we are building insanely interesting and powerful tools. And we can be sure by looking on the past of human history, one thing we can be 100% sure about, it will be abused. There's no way around. And I think it's fair enough to assume as well, yeah, it would be naive to not think that it would go to this direction. But what does it mean for us and our mindset? How should we address and think about the stuff we do here actually? Because for us, it's perfect, it's great, it's revolutionary. Maybe in 200 years, there will be people trying to go back in history and say, who are these fuckers who started to set up the solution? And then they jump into calls like this and say, wait, this was an honest intent. They're quite nice people, actually. Why did this fucked up so much? With the 100% sure this will be the case. Maybe not in 200 years, maybe just in, let's say, 10 years from now. But yeah. But still shouldn't keep us by trying the best anyway. Then, what do you think, guys? I think seems a little bit like that's it for today.
Great session. Great session. Nice conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Life, take us away.
Yeah, man. Thank you all so much for joining. It came to a beautiful cadence there at the end. Thanks so much. It was quite a navigation through topics. So we shall see you here in 2 weeks for the next Deep Funding Town Hall. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Bye-bye.
Great meeting. Thank you all for your input. Very valuable and wonderful.
It was great to meet everyone.